David Chen never imagined that a knocked-over ladder and a damaged satellite dish would change his life forever. The single father of two had been struggling to keep his small electronics repair shop afloat in the quiet desert town of Clearwater, Nevada, working 16-hour days just to pay rent and keep food on the table. His kids, 8-year-old Emma and 12-year-old Lucas, deserved so much more than the cramped apartment above his failing business, but David was running out of options and running out of time. The bank had already sent 2 notices, and his landlord was losing patience. But on this sweltering Tuesday evening, as he walked to his beat-up Honda Civic after another day of disappointing sales, David spotted a woman standing beside a sleek black sedan, staring helplessly at the damaged satellite equipment on the roof of the old communications building next to his shop. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. She looked completely out of place in her crisp, white blazer and designer shoes, her dark hair pulled back in a perfect bun, clearly from a world far removed from the dusty streets of Clearwater. What David didn't know was that this woman, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, was one of the most powerful executives at SpaceX, responsible for overseeing satellite communications systems worth billions of dollars. And she was in Clearwater, for reasons that would soon intertwine their fates in ways neither could imagine. As thunder rumbled across the Nevada desert and the first drops of an unexpected storm began to fall, neither David nor Elena realized they were about to meet the person who would completely transform their understanding of what was possible. The first thing David noticed wasn't her expensive clothes or the luxury sedan, but the look of genuine frustration on her face as she stood in the parking lot, cell phone pressed to her ear. The satellite dish mounted on the communications building had clearly taken a beating from the recent windstorms that had swept through the area, its receiver tilted at an awkward angle, and several cables hanging loose like forgotten Christmas lights. David had walked past this building countless times, had even considered offering to fix the equipment months ago when he first noticed the damage, but had never worked up the courage to approach the building's management company. Now, watching this woman pace back and forth beneath the darkening sky, he felt that familiar tug of conscience that had gotten him into trouble more times than he could count. His father had always said that helping people was a weakness in the business world, that every moment spent on charity was a moment stolen from his own family's survival. But David had never been able to walk past someone in need, even when he barely had enough to meet his own needs. The woman ended her call with obvious frustration, running her fingers through her hair and disrupting the perfect styling. She looked up at the damaged dish again, then down at her phone, then back up at the dish as if willing it to repair itself through sheer determination. David recognized that particular expression of technological helplessness. He'd seen it countless times in his shop when customers brought in devices that seemed to have failed for mysterious reasons, their faces showing the same mixture of confusion and desperation. "Excuse me," David called out, his voice carrying across the empty parking lot. "Are you having trouble with the satellite equipment?" Elena turned toward him, her expression shifting from frustration to cautious hope. Up close, David could see that despite her polished appearance, there were lines of stress around her eyes, and her shoulders carried the tension of someone accustomed to solving complex problems but currently facing one beyond her immediate expertise. "Yes, actually," she replied, her voice carrying a slight accent that David couldn't quite place. "I'm trying to establish a communication link, but the dish appears to be misaligned. The building management company says they can't get a technician out here until next week, but I need this working tonight." David glanced up at the dish, his experienced eye quickly assessing the damage. The receiver was indeed tilted incorrectly, and he could see that several coaxial cables had come loose from their connections. It wasn't a particularly complex repair, but it would require someone comfortable working on rooftops and familiar with satellite alignment procedures. Most importantly, it would require someone willing to climb up there in the approaching storm. "I run the electronics repair shop next door," David said, pointing toward his small storefront, with its faded sign reading, "Chen Electronics, fast, honest, affordable. I've worked on satellite systems before. It looks like mostly alignment and connection issues. Probably fixable, but not exactly safe to attempt in this weather." Elena looked toward the approaching storm clouds, then back at David. Lightning flickered in the distance, still far enough away to be safe, but close enough to make any rooftop work inadvisable. How long would something like that normally take to repair? Under normal circumstances, maybe an hour, But with this storm coming in, David shrugged apologetically. I wouldn't recommend anyone going up there tonight. Those dishes can act like lightning rods. Elena's phone buzzed with an incoming call, and David could see her internal struggle as she glanced between the device and the damaged equipment. Whatever communication she needed to establish, it was clearly urgent enough that she was considering asking him to risk working in dangerous conditions. I'm sorry, she said, declining the call. I shouldn't even be thinking about asking someone to work in this weather. It's just that, she gestured helplessly at the dish. This is more important than I can adequately explain. David studied her face, noting the genuine concern in her expression. This wasn't the entitled impatience of someone accustomed to having problems solved with money. This was the anxiety of someone facing consequences that extended far beyond personal inconvenience. What kind of communication are you trying to establish? David asked. Maybe there's another way to approach the problem. Elena hesitated, clearly debating how much information to share with a stranger. I need to connect with a satellite network for data transmission. Very high bandwidth, very secure. The building was supposed to have functioning equipment, but obviously, she gestured again at the damaged dish. David's interest was immediately piqued. His shop might be struggling, but his knowledge of electronics and communication systems was extensive. Before Emma was born, and his life took an unexpected turn toward single parenthood, he had been pursuing advanced certifications in satellite communications technology. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was probably one of the few people in Clearwater actually qualified to handle this type of repair. What kind of satellite network? He asked. Commercial telecommunications, military, scientific research? Elena's eyebrows rose slightly at his technical vocabulary. Clearly, she hadn't expected such specific questions from a small-town repair shop owner. It's a private network, very specialized. I really can't say much more than that. The first heavy raindrops began to fall, splattering against the hot asphalt and releasing the distinctive scent of desert rain. David looked up at the darkening sky, then back at Elena, then at his shop where he could see lights on in the apartment above, where his children were probably doing homework at the kitchen table that served as both dining room and study space. Look, he said, making a decision that his practical side immediately questioned. The storm's going to pass through pretty quickly. They usually do out here. If you're willing to wait it out, I can take a look at the dish afterward. No charge for the assessment. And if it's something I can fix safely, we can talk about compensation. Elena's expression showed surprise, then something that might have been relief. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Be willing to do that? Even though you don't know anything about what I need it for? I know enough, David replied. I know you're stuck in a small town in the middle of the desert, dealing with equipment failure at the worst possible time. I know you're trying to solve a problem that's clearly important to you, and I know I have the skills to help, assuming the repair is within reasonable safety parameters. The rain was beginning to fall more steadily now, and both of them instinctively moved toward the shelter of the building's overhang. Elena pulled out her phone again, checking the time with obvious anxiety. How long do these storms typically last? She asked. Maybe an hour, hour and a half. They blow through, fast but intense. David glanced toward his shop. You're welcome to wait in my place. I was just heading upstairs to make dinner for my kids. Nothing fancy, but it's dry and warm. Elena looked toward the small storefront, then back at David with an expression of genuine surprise. It was clear that such spontaneous hospitality was not something she encountered regularly in her professional life. I don't want to impose on your family time, she said carefully. You're not imposing. My kids are used to me bringing work home, and they're curious about everyone and everything. Fair warning, though, they'll probably ask you a million questions about whatever kind of car that is. David nodded toward her sedan. They're convinced that anyone who drives something that clean and expensive must have fascinating stories to tell. Despite her obvious stress, Elena smiled at that. It's just a rental, but I suppose that won't matter to them. Not even a little bit. To them, you're basically a visitor from another planet. David pulled out his keys as the rain intensified. Come on, let's get out of this weather. I'll show you what I can see of the dish from inside, and we can plan the repair once the storm passes. Elena followed him toward the shop, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. As David unlocked the door and gestured for her to enter first, she paused for a moment, looking back at the damaged satellite dish that had brought them together. "I should mention," she said quietly, "this repair could be more complicated than it appears. The equipment might be connected to systems that require very specific calibration procedures." David held the door open, rain beginning to soak through his work shirt. "Then it's a good thing I enjoy complicated problems. They're usually the most interesting ones to solve." As they stepped into the warmth and artificial lighting of Chen Electronics, neither David nor Elena could have imagined that this chance encounter would ultimately lead to opportunities and challenges that would reshape both of their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. The interior of Chen Electronics told the story of a man trying to maintain professional standards despite obvious financial constraints. The shop was meticulously organized, with repair tools arranged in precise order and customer devices cataloged with careful attention to detail. But the equipment was clearly aging, the furniture showed signs of heavy use, and the overall atmosphere spoke of someone making the best of limited resources. Elena took in the details with the observational skills that had served her well in evaluating technical facilities around the world. Despite the shop's modest appearance, she could see evidence of genuine expertise. The diagnostic equipment, while not cutting-edge, was well-maintained and properly calibrated. The repair manuals were current editions, extensively bookmarked and annotated. Most tellingly, the completed repair tickets she could see showed documentation practices that exceeded what she'd expect from a simple consumer electronics shop. "Dad, is that you?" A young voice called from upstairs, followed by the sound of rapid footsteps on wooden stairs. "Yeah, Em, I'm back. And we have a guest." David looked apologetically at Elena. "Fair warning. My daughter has no concept of personal space or appropriate questions for strangers." Emma appeared at the bottom of the stairs, a girl with her father's dark hair but brighter, more inquisitive eyes. She wore a school t-shirt with paint stains and jeans with strategically placed patches, the uniform of a child who approached life with enthusiasm and little regard for keeping clean. "Hi," Emma said directly to Elena, displaying none of the shyness that might be expected when meeting an adult stranger. "Are you here to get something fixed? Is that your car outside? It's really shiny. Do you live around here? I haven't seen you before, and I know pretty much everyone in town." Elena found herself smiling despite her anxiety. There was something refreshing about Emma's direct curiosity, so different from the careful, politically motivated conversations that dominated her professional interactions. "I'm Elena," she replied, crouching down to Emma's eye level. "I'm not from around here, and yes, that's my car, though it's actually a rental. I'm here because some equipment needs repair, and your father offered to help." "Cool! Dad fixes everything." He fixed Mrs. Patterson's television when she said it was completely broken, and the big electronics store told her to buy a new one. He fixed Mr. Rodriguez's computer when it got a virus and lost all his pictures. He even fixed my tablet when I accidentally dropped it in the bathtub. Emma's pride in her father's abilities was evident in her voice. "Emma," David warned gently, "let Elena get out of the rain before you give her my entire professional history." Lucas appeared at the top of the stairs, more cautious than his sister but equally curious. At 12, he had begun developing the careful observation skills that often emerge in children who have learned to monitor adult stress levels and adjust their behavior accordingly. "Is everything okay?" Lucas asked, his eyes moving between David and Elena, with the practiced assessment of a child accustomed to evaluating whether new developments in his father's business were positive or problematic. "Everything's fine, Luke. Elena needs some technical help, and we're waiting for the storm to pass before I can take a look at the equipment." David hung his wet jacket on a hook behind the counter. "What are you guys working on up there?" "Math homework," Emma replied with theatrical disgust. "Word problems about satellites and orbital mechanics. Mrs. Henderson says we need to understand how things work in space because technology is the future." Elena's eyebrows rose with interest. "Orbital mechanics? That's pretty advanced for elementary school." "Emma's in the gifted program," David explained with obvious pride. "The curriculum includes more science and mathematics than the standard track." Lucas is working on a programming project for his computer science class. You're learning programming? Elena asked Lucas, who nodded with the restrained enthusiasm of a preteen trying to appear mature. JavaScript and Python. I'm building a website for Dad's shop. It's supposed to help customers track their repair status and schedule appointments. Elena looked around the shop with new appreciation. The children's academic achievements and technical interests suggested that David's expertise extended well beyond basic electronics repair. Their comfortable discussion of advanced topics indicated exposure to technical concepts that went far beyond what you'd expect in a household struggling financially. That sounds like a very practical application of programming skills, Elena said to Lucas. Website development requires understanding both technical implementation and user experience design. Lucas's attempt at teenage nonchalance cracked slightly at her use of proper technical terminology. Do you work with computers? Elena glanced at David, who was watching the interaction with obvious curiosity about her background. I work with computer systems, yes. Very large, very complex systems that require precise coordination and constant monitoring. Like servers? Emma asked, demonstrating that her technical vocabulary was more advanced than her age might suggest. Something like that, Elena replied carefully. Systems that help coordinate communications and data transmission across very long distances. The rain was now drumming steadily against the shop windows, and occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the darkening street outside. David moved to the window, assessing the storm's intensity and trying to estimate how long they'd need to wait before attempting any rooftop work. Why don't you guys finish your homework while Elena and I look at some technical specifications? David suggested. We'll figure out dinner once the storm passes, and I've had a chance to evaluate the repair situation. Emma and Lucas exchanged a look that clearly communicated their desire to continue questioning the interesting stranger. But they obediently headed back upstairs. Elena watched them go with an expression that David couldn't quite interpret. They're remarkable children, she said quietly. Very bright, very well-mannered. You should be proud. I am, David replied simply. They're pretty much the only thing I've ever done completely right. Elena heard something in his tone that suggested deeper struggles than just the obvious financial pressures of maintaining a small business. She followed him to a computer terminal where he began pulling up technical diagrams and reference materials related to satellite communication systems. Before I attempt any repair work, I'll need to understand exactly what kind of equipment we're dealing with, David explained, his demeanor shifting into the focused professionalism that had impressed many customers over the years. Satellite dishes can be configured for different types of signals, different frequency ranges, different security protocols. The alignment and calibration procedures vary significantly depending on the specific application. Elena watched as David navigated through technical databases with the easy familiarity of someone who had spent considerable time studying these systems. His questions were precise and relevant, demonstrating knowledge that went well beyond basic repair skills. The equipment is designed for high-bandwidth data transmission to low Earth orbit satellites, Elena said carefully, providing more technical detail than she had shared earlier. It requires precise pointing accuracy and the ability to maintain lock during satellite transitions. David's hands paused over the keyboard as he processed this information. Low Earth orbit satellites with transition tracking suggested military or aerospace applications, far more sophisticated than the commercial satellite television systems he typically worked with. That's significantly more complex than I initially assumed, he admitted. The pointing accuracy requirements alone would require specialized calibration equipment that I probably don't have access to. Elena felt her heart sink as she realized that even this unexpected source of potential help might not be sufficient to solve her problem. The communications link she needed to establish was critical for coordinating a time-sensitive operation, and every hour of delay increased the risk of mission failure. However, David continued, his tone thoughtful. If the basic mechanical alignment is correct and the hardware connections are solid, it might be possible to achieve sufficient accuracy for temporary operation. It wouldn't meet full specification requirements, but it could potentially establish a basic communications link. Elena's expression brightened slightly. How basic? What kind of data transmission rates would be possible? David pulled up a complex calculation program and began entering parameters based on the information Elena had provided. Assuming standard hardware and optimal weather conditions, probably 70 to 80% of full bandwidth capacity. More than enough for voice communications and basic data transmission, possibly sufficient for video conferencing or file transfers depending on the file sizes involved. That might actually be workable, Elena said, her voice carrying the first note of genuine optimism since David had encountered her in the parking lot. The communication doesn't require maximum bandwidth, just reliability and security. Outside, the storm was beginning to show signs of weakening. The lightning flashes were becoming less frequent, and the drumming of rain against the windows had decreased from the earlier torrential intensity. David checked the weather radar on his computer, noting that the storm system was moving eastward at a steady pace. Another 20 minutes and it should be safe to work outside, he estimated. The repair itself shouldn't take more than an hour, assuming we don't encounter any hardware failures or compatibility issues. Elena checked her phone again, calculating time zones and deadline pressures. That would put us at around 8:30. The timing could actually work perfectly. David began gathering the tools and equipment he'd need for the repair, selecting items from his inventory with the methodical care of someone accustomed to working in challenging conditions with limited resources. Elena watched his preparations with growing confidence that she had indeed found someone capable of solving her immediate problem. "Can I ask what kind of background you have with satellite systems?" Elena asked as David tested a digital multimeter and added it to his tool collection. This level of knowledge isn't something you typically develop just from consumer electronics repair. David paused in his preparations, considering how much personal history to share with someone he'd known for less than an hour. "I was working toward advanced certifications in satellite communications technology a few years ago. Had plans to work for one of the major aerospace contractors, maybe eventually get involved with space-based systems development." "What changed?" Elena asked gently, sensing that there was more to the story. "Life changed," David replied simply. "My wife passed away when Emma was 3 and Lucas was 7. Suddenly I was a single parent with 2 young children and no family support system. The career I'd planned required travel, long hours, sometimes extended assignments in remote locations. Not exactly compatible with raising kids." Elena felt a pang of recognition at his words. She had made similar sacrifices for her own career, though in the opposite direction, choosing professional advancement over personal relationships and family considerations. The difference was that her choices had been voluntary, while David's had been forced by circumstances beyond his control. "So you opened the repair shop to stay close to home," she observed. "It seemed like the best way to use my technical skills while maintaining a stable home environment for the kids. I could work flexible hours, be available when they needed me, and still earn enough to cover basic expenses." David's tone was matter-of-fact, but Elena could hear the underlying sadness of dreams deferred. "Do you ever regret the decision?" she asked. David looked up toward the ceiling, where they could hear his children's voices as they discussed homework and other typical concerns of young people whose biggest worries involve school assignments and social dynamics. "I regret that I couldn't give them both, the career I wanted and the stability they needed. But I don't regret choosing them over professional advancement. They've turned out to be more interesting and rewarding than any job I could have imagined." Elena nodded slowly, understanding the weight of such choices in ways that David probably couldn't guess. Her own rise through the aerospace industry had required sacrifices that she sometimes questioned, particularly when she encountered families like this one that seemed to have found ways to balance professional competence with personal connection. The rain outside had diminished to a light drizzle, and the lightning had moved far enough east that the thunder was barely audible. David checked the weather radar one more time, then gathered his tools in a professional-grade toolkit that had clearly seen extensive use. "Ready when you are," he announced. "Though I should mention that if we encounter any problems that require specialized equipment or replacement parts, we might need to postpone the completion until tomorrow." Elena stood and straightened her jacket, her business-focused demeanor returning as she prepared to oversee the technical work that could determine the success or failure of her mission. "Understood. Let's see what we're dealing with." As they prepared to head back outside, David called up to his children. "Emma, Lucas, I'm going to work on that repair project. Should be back within an hour or so. Elena's going to help supervise the work." "Okay, Dad," came Lucas's voice. "We'll keep working on homework. Be careful on the roof," Emma added, with the practical concern of a child who had learned to worry about her father's safety during his more challenging repair jobs. Elena smiled at Emma's protective instincts. "I'll make sure he's careful," she promised, though she privately wondered whether her own inexperience with hands-on technical work might make her more of a distraction than a help. David opened the shop door and stepped into the cool, humid air left behind by the passing storm. The parking lot was still wet, but the immediate danger of lightning had passed, and visibility was adequate for the precise work required for satellite dish alignment. Looking up at the damaged equipment that had brought them together, David felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and caution that always preceded a challenging repair job. This particular repair, however, carried additional significance that went beyond technical problem-solving. Something about Elena's urgency and the sophisticated nature of the communications requirements suggested that success could lead to opportunities far beyond the modest payment he'd normally charge for such work. Elena followed him across the parking lot, her business shoes less than ideal for the wet pavement, but her determination undiminished by the practical challenges ahead. She had encountered numerous technical obstacles throughout her career, and she had learned that success often required adapting to unexpected circumstances and working with whatever resources were available. As they approached the building where the damaged satellite dish waited for repair, neither David nor Elena could have predicted that this collaboration would mark the beginning of changes that would transform not just their immediate circumstances, but their entire understanding of what their futures might hold. The communications building stood 3 stories tall, its flat roof accessible via an external metal staircase that looked like it had been added as an afterthought. David assessed the access route, while Elena examined the building's overall condition, both of them mentally cataloging potential challenges before beginning the actual repair work. "The good news is that the dish appears to be mounted on a stable platform," David observed, pointing to the heavy concrete base visible from their ground-level perspective. "The bad news is that some of those cable connections are going to require work in tight spaces with limited room for maneuvering." Elena nodded, appreciating his thorough assessment of the situation before committing to a course of action. In her professional experience, the people who took time to evaluate potential problems were usually the ones most capable of solving them efficiently. "What's our biggest risk factor?" she asked, applying the systematic risk analysis approach that had become second nature in her aerospace work. "Weather's no longer a concern, and the structural access looks adequate," David replied, approaching the problem with similar methodical thinking. "The main risks are equipment compatibility and calibration accuracy. If the existing hardware isn't designed for the type of signal coordination you need, or if the pointing accuracy requirements exceed what I can achieve with portable equipment, we might not be able to establish a reliable connection." Elena considered this carefully. The mission she was supporting could tolerate some reduction in communication quality, but it absolutely required reliable signal transmission during several critical time windows over the next 48 hours. "What would constitute adequate reliability for your assessment?" she asked. "Stable signal strength, minimal packet loss, consistent connection during satellite passes. Basically, the communication link should work when you need it to work, even if it's not operating at optimal efficiency." That sounded manageable for Elena's requirements. "Then let's see what we can accomplish." David led the way up the external staircase, his toolkit carefully balanced to maintain proper weight distribution during the climb. Elena followed, grateful that her regular fitness routine had prepared her for more physical challenges than her typical office environment required. The rooftop offered a clear view of the surrounding desert landscape, now glistening with moisture from the recent storm. The air smelled clean and fresh, with the distinctive scent that follows desert rainfall. In the distance, the lights of Clearwater twinkled against the darkening sky, while overhead, the first stars were becoming visible through the clearing clouds. The satellite dish itself was larger than it had appeared from ground level, a professional-grade parabolic antenna approximately 6 feet in diameter. David immediately began examining the mounting hardware, checking for loose bolts, damaged components, and signs of weather-related deterioration. "The mechanical systems look solid," he announced, after a few minutes of careful inspection. "The pointing mechanism is intact, and the dish surface doesn't show any significant damage. The problems appear to be exactly what we suspected: misalignment and loose connections." Elena watched as David traced the cable routing from the dish to the building's communications equipment room, noting several places where weather exposure had caused connectors to work loose from their proper positions. "How long do you estimate for the mechanical corrections?" she asked. 20 minutes for the connections, maybe another 15 for rough alignment. The precise calibration will take longer and require input from your end about signal strength and quality. David began work immediately, his movements efficient and confident as he tightened connections and secured loose cables. Elena found herself impressed by his obvious competence with complex technical systems, particularly given his current circumstances running a small-town repair shop. "You mentioned working toward aerospace industry certifications," she said as David tested cable continuity with his multimeter. "Which companies were you considering?" David paused in his work, looking slightly surprised by her continued interest in his background. "The major contractors, primarily. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, SpaceX. I was particularly interested in satellite communications systems and ground-based mission support." Elena felt her heart skip slightly at the mention of SpaceX, though she kept her expression neutral. "What attracted you to that field specifically?" "The technical challenges, mainly. Satellite communications requires integration of multiple complex systems. Mechanical positioning, electronic signal processing, software coordination, real-time adaptation to changing conditions. It's like solving a multi-dimensional puzzle where the parameters keep shifting." Elena nodded, recognizing the same intellectual fascination that had drawn her to similar work. "And the applications have significance beyond just technical problem-solving." "Exactly. The work enables everything from weather forecasting to global communications to scientific research. You're solving immediate technical problems, but you're also contributing to capabilities that benefit millions of people." David returned to his work, but Elena could see that discussing his original career aspirations had energized him in ways that routine electronics repair probably didn't. She found herself wondering what circumstances had to align for someone with his obvious capabilities to have genuine opportunities to return to that kind of work. "Signal cables are secure," David announced, completing the connection repairs. "Now we need to work on dish alignment. This is where I'll need your input about signal acquisition and quality." Elena pulled out a sophisticated-looking device that David didn't immediately recognize. "This should give us real-time feedback about signal strength and pointing accuracy. What's our starting position?" David consulted a compass and calculated the approximate azimuth for optimal satellite alignment based on their geographic location. "We'll start with bearing 210 degrees, elevation angle approximately 35 degrees. That should get us in the general vicinity of the satellite constellation you're trying to reach." Elena's eyebrows rose at his precise calculations. "How did you determine those parameters without knowing the specific orbital characteristics?" "Low Earth orbit satellites in this geographic region typically follow predictable patterns for optimal coverage of North American ground stations. The exact parameters depend on the specific satellite, but the general positioning requirements are fairly standard." Elena activated her signal monitoring device and watched as David began the careful process of adjusting the dish's position. The mechanical controls responded smoothly, indicating that the equipment was well maintained despite its current alignment problems. "Signal acquisition," Elena announced as the monitoring device began displaying data. "Strength is low but stable. Can you adjust elevation slightly?" David made fine adjustments while Elena monitored the signal characteristics, their collaboration developing a natural rhythm as they worked toward optimal alignment. The process required patience and precision, with tiny adjustments producing measurable changes in communication quality. "Better," Elena said as the signal strength indicators improved. "Can you hold that position while I test data transmission?" Elena connected a laptop computer to the satellite system and began executing connection protocols that David recognized as far more sophisticated than typical commercial satellite internet. The security authentication procedures alone suggested military or aerospace applications requiring very high levels of data protection. "Transmission test successful," Elena announced, after several minutes of monitoring. "Bandwidth is approximately 85% of specification, which is actually better than your estimate. Connection stability looks excellent." David felt a surge of professional satisfaction at the successful completion of a complex technical challenge. More than that, he sensed that Elena's obvious relief and satisfaction suggested that this repair had significance far beyond the immediate technical problem. "What exactly are you coordinating with this communication link?" David asked as Elena continued testing various system functions. Elena hesitated, clearly debating how much information to share. The successful repair had created a sense of partnership between them, but she was obviously constrained by professional confidentiality requirements. "I coordinate technical operations for a company that develops advanced aerospace systems," she said carefully. "Sometimes that requires establishing secure communications with remote facilities or mobile platforms that are testing new technologies." David nodded, understanding that her work likely involved information that couldn't be shared with unauthorized personnel. "Well, whatever you're coordinating, the communication link should be reliable for normal operations. If you encounter any problems or need modifications to the setup, I'll be available to provide additional support." Elena looked at him with an expression that seemed to combine gratitude with something else that David couldn't quite interpret. "David, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." The seriousness of her tone immediately captured his attention. "Okay. How would you feel about the possibility of using your technical skills for the kind of work you originally planned to pursue? Not immediately, not without proper consideration of your family responsibilities, but as a future opportunity that might become available?" David felt his heart rate increase as he processed the implications of her question. "Are you saying that tonight's repair work might lead to other opportunities?" "I'm saying that the company I work for is always looking for people with your combination of technical expertise and practical problem-solving abilities. People who can work under pressure, adapt to unexpected challenges, and deliver reliable solutions when the stakes are high." Elena's words carried the weight of genuine professional assessment rather than polite conversation. David realized that he had been essentially auditioned during the repair process, and apparently he had performed well enough to warrant consideration for more significant opportunities. "What kind of timeline would we be talking about?" David asked, his mind immediately jumping to considerations about his children's stability and his current business obligations. "That would depend on several factors, including your interest level and the specific position requirements. But the company I work for believes in supporting employee relocation and family transition when the right opportunities arise." David looked out over the desert landscape, then back at the satellite dish that had been successfully restored to full functionality. An hour ago, he had been facing another disappointing day of minimal business revenue and mounting financial pressures. Now he was contemplating possibilities that could reshape his entire career trajectory. "I'd need to know a lot more about the specific opportunity, the location requirements, the impact on my children's lives," David said slowly. "But yes, I'd definitely be interested in learning more." Elena smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, her expression seemed completely relaxed and genuine. "I thought you might be. And I think the company I work for would be very interested in someone with your capabilities and character." As they began gathering tools and preparing to leave the rooftop, David felt a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension about what the evening's unexpected encounter might ultimately mean for his family's future. Elena, meanwhile, was already planning how to present David's qualifications to her colleagues in a way that would ensure he received serious consideration for the opportunities she had in mind. Neither of them spoke much during the descent from the rooftop, both absorbed in contemplating how dramatically their circumstances had changed in the space of a few hours. What had begun as a simple technical problem had evolved into something that could potentially transform both of their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. Back in David's shop, Emma and Lucas were waiting with barely contained curiosity about the repair project and its mysterious beneficiary. Elena could see their eagerness to learn more about what their father had been working on, and whether the evening's activities might lead to positive changes in their family situation. "Did you get it working?" Emma asked immediately, her practical nature focused on the technical success of the project. "We did," David confirmed. "Elena's equipment is now communicating properly with the satellites it needs to reach." "Satellites, plural?" Lucas asked, his programming background making him curious about the complexity of the systems involved. Elena glanced at David, who nodded slightly, indicating that some general technical discussion would be acceptable. "The system can communicate with multiple satellites as they pass overhead, maintaining continuous connection by switching between different platforms as they move across the sky." Lucas's eyes widened with interest. "That's like the mesh networking concepts we studied in computer class, but in 3 dimensions with moving nodes." "That's actually a very good analogy," Elena said, impressed by his technical insight. "The coordination requirements are quite complex, which, is why precise equipment alignment is so critical. Elena smiled at Emma's astute question about whether her father might receive more interesting work opportunities. That depends on several factors, Emma, but I can tell you that tonight's repair work demonstrated some very impressive technical capabilities. David felt a warmth in his chest at Elena's praise, but also a familiar anxiety about raising his children's expectations too high. They had experienced enough disappointment in their young lives, and he was reluctant to discuss possibilities that might not materialize into concrete opportunities. Speaking of work, David said, steering the conversation toward more immediate concerns, I should probably get started on dinner. It's been a long day for everyone. Elena checked her phone and realized that the successful repair had resolved her immediate crisis. But it had also created a new situation that required careful consideration. She had found someone whose technical skills and personal character impressed her enough to recommend for positions within her organization, but she also recognized that extracting him from his current circumstances would require careful planning and substantial support. Actually, Elena said thoughtfully, I'm wondering if I might impose on your hospitality just a bit longer. I need to conduct a few communications tests using the equipment we just repaired, and it would be helpful to have technical support available in case any adjustments are needed. David considered this request. Extended technical support would normally warrant additional compensation, but Elena's earlier hints about future opportunities suggested that maintaining a positive working relationship could have benefits beyond immediate payment. That's not a problem, David replied. How long do you anticipate needing for the testing procedures? Probably a couple of hours. There are specific communication windows when the satellites are optimally positioned, and I need to verify that the system maintains reliable connection during those periods. Emma's face lit up with excitement at the prospect of observing real satellite communications in action. Can we watch how the satellite system works? We're studying space technology in school, and Mrs. Henderson says hands-on experience is the best way to learn. Elena looked to David for guidance about how much technical detail would be appropriate to share with children. David recognized his daughter's genuine curiosity and educational motivation, but he also understood that Elena's work might involve confidential information. Maybe Elena can explain some general concepts about satellite communications while she's conducting her tests, David suggested diplomatically, as long as it doesn't interfere with the technical procedures. Elena found herself genuinely pleased by the prospect of sharing her enthusiasm for aerospace technology with young people who were clearly bright and motivated to learn. Much of her professional time was spent in meetings and administrative duties that kept her removed from the hands-on technical work that had originally drawn her to the field. I think that could work very well, Elena agreed. In fact, having curious observers might help me think through the technical procedures more systematically. David began preparing a simple dinner while Elena set up her laptop and testing equipment in the shop area. Emma and Lucas positioned themselves where they could observe the technical work without interfering, their attention focused intently on the sophisticated equipment and complex procedures. The first thing we need to understand, Elena explained as she initiated connection protocols, is that satellites in low Earth orbit are constantly moving relative to any fixed position on the ground. That means our communication dish needs to track their movement and seamlessly transfer connections between different satellites as they pass overhead. Lucas, with his programming background, immediately grasped the technical challenge. So you need software that can predict satellite positions and automatically adjust the dish pointing? Exactly right! The software uses orbital mechanics calculations to determine where each satellite will be at any given time, then coordinates the dish movements to maintain optimal signal strength. Emma raised her hand as if she were in school. What happens if the software makes a mistake and points the dish in the wrong direction? Elena smiled at Emma's practical concern. That's an excellent question. The system includes multiple backup procedures and real-time monitoring to detect and correct pointing errors. It's designed to be very reliable because the communications it supports can't afford interruptions. As Elena worked through her testing procedures, David found himself increasingly impressed by her ability to explain complex technical concepts in ways that were accessible to his children while still maintaining scientific accuracy. It was clear that she had significant experience in technical education and communication. The testing process itself was fascinating to observe. Elena's laptop displayed real-time tracking information, showing satellite positions, signal strength measurements, and data transmission statistics. The children watched in amazement as the system automatically adjusted to maintain connections with satellites that were moving across the sky at thousands of miles per hour. "This is so much cooler than the satellite TV at home," Emma observed, watching signal strength indicators fluctuate as the dish tracked satellite movement. "The principles are similar," Elena explained, "but the requirements for precision and reliability are much higher. Satellite television can tolerate occasional signal interruptions, but the applications I support require continuous, secure communication." David joined them after finishing dinner preparations, bringing coffee for himself and Elena and snacks for the children. As he observed Elena's testing procedures, he found himself mentally cataloging the technical skills and knowledge areas that her work obviously required. "The orbital mechanics calculations alone must be incredibly complex," David observed, watching Elena monitor satellite tracking algorithms. "They are, but modern computers handle most of the mathematical complexity automatically. The real challenge is integrating all the different system components: tracking software, dish positioning hardware, signal processing electronics, security protocols, and ensuring they work together reliably under all possible conditions." Elena's description of system integration challenges resonated strongly with David's own technical interests. He had always been drawn to projects that required coordinating multiple complex subsystems, finding satisfaction in solving problems that existed at the interfaces between different technologies. "What kind of educational background is typically required for this type of work?" David asked, trying to sound casual while gathering information about qualification requirements. Elena glanced at him with an expression that suggested she understood the personal motivation behind his question. "Formal education requirements vary depending on the specific position, but practical experience with complex systems integration is often more important than specific degree credentials. The ability to solve unexpected problems under pressure, work effectively with interdisciplinary teams, and maintain focus on mission-critical objectives. Those characteristics can't really be taught in traditional academic settings." David felt encouraged by her emphasis on practical skills over formal credentials. His technical knowledge was extensive and current, but his educational background included several gaps created by his transition to single parenthood and small business ownership. Elena's laptop chimed with an incoming communication, and her expression immediately shifted to focused concentration as she established contact with whoever was on the other end of the secure connection. "Rodriguez here," she said into her headset microphone. "Signal quality is excellent. Bandwidth is approximately 85% of specification. All systems are functioning within acceptable parameters." David couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but Elena's responses suggested that she was providing technical updates to colleagues who were coordinating some kind of time-sensitive operation. "Understood. Maintaining communication standby for the next phase. Estimated completion time is approximately 6 hours from now, assuming no unexpected complications." Emma and Lucas watched the professional conversation with obvious fascination. It was clear that Elena was involved in coordinating something important and complex, far removed from the routine activities of their small desert town. After concluding the communication, Elena turned back to her hosts with an expression that combined satisfaction with continued tension about upcoming challenges. "Is everything proceeding according to plan?" David asked, respecting her obvious need for confidentiality while offering support if technical problems developed. "So far, yes. The communication link is performing exactly as needed, which eliminates one major source of potential complications." Elena looked at the children, then back at David. "I'm wondering if I might ask another favor. The coordination I'm supporting will continue through most of the night, and I'll need to maintain communication standby throughout that period. Is there somewhere I could work without disrupting your family's evening routine?" David considered the request. Elena's extended presence would give him more opportunities to demonstrate his technical capabilities and learn about potential career opportunities, but it would also require accommodating a relative stranger in their small living space during what was normally private family time. "You're welcome to continue working here in the shop," David offered. "I can set up additional lighting and make sure you have everything you need for extended operations." The children usually do homework and recreational activities upstairs in the evening, so you'd have quiet working conditions. Elena looked relieved at the practical solution. That would be perfect. I really appreciate your flexibility with these unexpected circumstances. As David arranged additional workspace for Elena's extended operations, he found himself wondering about the nature of the project that required such careful coordination and sophisticated communications. Elena's professional demeanor and the advanced equipment she was using suggested involvement in something far more significant than routine business operations. Emma approached Elena's workstation with the careful curiosity of a child who had been taught to respect complex equipment but remained fascinated by technical processes. "Elena," Emma said politely, "what's the most exciting thing about working with satellites?" Elena paused in her system monitoring to consider Emma's question seriously. "I think it's the combination of technical challenge and meaningful impact. When you're working with satellites, you're dealing with some of the most sophisticated technology humans have ever created, but you're also enabling capabilities that benefit people all over the world." "Like what kinds of benefits?" Lucas asked, joining the conversation. "Satellite systems enable weather prediction, which helps farmers know when to plant crops and helps people prepare for storms. They enable global communications, so people can stay connected with family and friends anywhere in the world. They enable navigation systems that help drivers find their destinations and help rescue teams locate people who need help." Elena's enthusiasm for her work was evident as she described its broader implications. David found himself drawn to her description of meaningful technical challenges that had significance beyond just solving engineering problems. "The work your father did tonight," Elena continued, "was part of supporting a mission that will ultimately help advance our understanding of space-based systems. The communication link we established will help coordinate testing of new technologies that could improve satellite capabilities for everyone." David felt a surge of pride at Elena's description of his contribution to something significant and worthwhile. It had been a long time since his technical work had felt connected to anything larger than routine equipment repairs and customer service. As the evening progressed, Elena continued her coordination duties while David helped his children with homework and evening activities. Despite the unusual circumstances, the evening developed a surprisingly comfortable domestic routine, with Elena's technical work happening in parallel with normal family activities. Around 9 o'clock, David noticed that Elena was conducting more frequent communications with her colleagues, suggesting that whatever operation she was supporting was entering a more active phase. "Is there anything I can do to help with the technical coordination?" David asked quietly, not wanting to interfere but offering assistance if needed. Elena looked up from her monitors with an expression of gratitude. "Actually, yes. I'm going to need to monitor multiple communication channels simultaneously, and it would be helpful to have someone else tracking system performance indicators while I focus on coordination communications." David pulled up a chair beside Elena's workstation and quickly familiarized himself with the monitoring displays. The technical interfaces were sophisticated but logically organized, and his experience with complex electronic systems allowed him to understand the key performance indicators quickly. "Signal strength is stable across all channels," David reported as Elena initiated a new round of communications. "Bandwidth utilization is running about 70%, well within acceptable ranges." Elena nodded appreciatively, then spoke into her headset microphone. "Rodriguez here. All ground communication systems are stable and ready for operational phase initiation." For the next hour, David found himself functioning as Elena's technical assistant, monitoring system performance, while she coordinated with multiple teams involved in what was obviously a complex, multifaceted operation. The work required constant attention to detail and immediate response to changing technical requirements. Despite the intensity of the coordination work, David found the experience exhilarating. He was using his technical skills at a level of sophistication that he hadn't experienced since his aborted career transition years earlier, and he was contributing to something that obviously had significance far beyond routine commercial applications. Around 10:30, Elena's coordination duties reached what appeared to be a critical phase. Her communications became more frequent and more urgent, and the technical monitoring displays showed increased activity across all channels. "Operational phase is go," Elena announced into her headset. "All ground systems are nominal, standing by for telemetry acquisition." David watched the monitoring displays as new data streams began appearing, showing what appeared to be real-time status information from some kind of mobile platform or vehicle. The data included navigation coordinates, system performance indicators, and environmental measurements that suggested operations in a challenging physical environment. "Telemetry looks good," David reported, reading from the technical displays. "All systems showing green status. Navigation is tracking nominal trajectory." Elena glanced at him with obvious appreciation for his technical support. This is exactly the kind of real-time coordination that satellite communication systems are designed to enable. What you're seeing is live data from a test platform that's currently conducting operations hundreds of miles from here. David felt a thrill of excitement at the realization that he was participating in real-time coordination of advanced aerospace operations. This was exactly the kind of work he had dreamed of pursuing before life circumstances forced him toward more conventional career choices. The operational phase continued for another hour, with Elena and David working together to monitor multiple communication channels and ensure reliable data transmission between the remote test platform and coordination teams in various locations. The work required constant attention and quick response to technical anomalies, but everything proceeded smoothly under Elena's expert coordination. Finally, around midnight, Elena received word that the operational phase had been completed successfully. The test platform had achieved all primary objectives, and communication systems had performed flawlessly throughout the mission duration. "Outstanding work," Elena said into her headset. "Ground communication support exceeded all performance requirements, standing down from operational status and returning to routine monitoring." Elena removed her headset and turned to David with an expression of genuine gratitude and professional respect. "David, I can't overstate how valuable your technical support was tonight. Having someone who could monitor system performance while I focused on coordination communications made everything much more manageable." David felt a glow of professional satisfaction that he hadn't experienced in years. "I have to admit, that was the most exciting technical work I've done since opening the repair shop. Being part of real-time aerospace operations coordination is exactly what I hoped to do when I was pursuing those original career plans." Elena studied his face carefully, noting the enthusiasm and competence he had demonstrated throughout the evening. "David, I think it's time for me to be more direct about the opportunities I mentioned earlier. The company I work for is SpaceX, and we're constantly looking for people with your combination of technical skills and ability to perform under pressure." David felt his heart rate spike at Elena's revelation. SpaceX was exactly the kind of company he had dreamed of working for, representing the cutting edge of aerospace technology development and space exploration. The possibility of actually working for such an organization seemed almost too good to be true. "Are you saying that tonight was essentially an extended job interview?" David asked, trying to process the implications of Elena's disclosure. "Not intentionally, but that's essentially what happened. When I saw your technical capabilities during the satellite repair, I realized that you might be exactly the kind of person we need for our ground operations support teams. Tonight's coordination work confirmed that assessment." Elena pulled out her business card and handed it to David. The simple white card read, "Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Director of Ground Operations, Space Exploration Technologies Corp., with contact information for SpaceX headquarters." David stared at the card, struggling to believe that this evening's chance encounter had put him in direct contact with a senior executive from one of the world's most advanced aerospace companies. What would working for SpaceX actually involve? David asked, trying to ground his excitement in practical considerations about how such an opportunity might affect his family's life. Ground operations support includes everything from mission coordination to equipment maintenance to real-time problem-solving during active operations. It's the kind of work you demonstrated tonight, but on a larger scale and with even more sophisticated systems. Elena's description sounded like everything David had hoped for in his original career plans. "And the position would be based where?" "We have facilities in several locations, but the primary ground operations centers are in California and Texas. Both locations offer excellent schools, family-friendly communities, and comprehensive relocation support for employees with children." David felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety at the thought of relocating his family across the country. Emma and Lucas had spent their entire lives in Clearwater, and uprooting them would involve significant emotional and logistical challenges. "This is obviously a major decision that would affect my children's lives as much as mine," David said carefully. "I'd need to consider all the implications very thoroughly. Elena nodded understandingly. Of course. These kinds of career transitions require careful planning, especially when children are involved. But I can tell you that SpaceX provides extensive support for employee families, including assistance with school transfers, housing arrangements, and community integration. Elena gathered her equipment and prepared to leave, but her departure felt more like the beginning of something significant rather than the end of a chance encounter. David, I'm going to recommend you for formal consideration by our hiring team. That will involve a series of interviews and assessments, but based on what I've observed tonight, I'm confident you'll perform very well. As Elena prepared to drive back to whatever hotel or airport would take her back to her regular life, David found himself contemplating changes that seemed both terrifying and exhilarating. The repair shop that had provided stability for his family might soon give way to opportunities that could transform their entire future. When might I hear about next steps in the process? David asked, trying to maintain professional composure while his mind raced with possibilities. I'll submit my recommendation first thing tomorrow morning. You should hear from our hiring team within a week, possibly sooner if they're as impressed by your qualifications as I expect them to be. Elena shook David's hand with the firm grip of someone sealing an important professional agreement. Thank you for tonight, David. The technical support, the hospitality, and the demonstration of exactly the kind of capabilities we need on our team. As Elena's rental car disappeared into the desert night, David stood in his small parking lot contemplating how dramatically his life circumstances might be about to change. 8 hours ago, he had been facing another day of financial stress and limited prospects. Now he was considering the possibility of working for one of the world's most innovative companies, doing exactly the kind of work he had always dreamed of pursuing. The satellite dish that had brought them together continued its silent communication with distant spacecraft, facilitating coordination of operations that pushed the boundaries of human technological capability. David looked up at the stars, many more visible now in the clear desert air after the evening storm, and wondered whether his future might soon involve direct participation in humanity's greatest adventure. Inside the shop, he found Emma and Lucas waiting up despite the late hour, their faces bright with curiosity about the evening's dramatic developments. "Dad," Emma said immediately, "was that lady really from SpaceX, like the company that sends rockets to space?" David sat down with his children, recognizing that they deserved honest information about developments that could significantly affect their lives. "Yes, Elena works for SpaceX, and she's offered to recommend me for a position with their ground operations team. But that would mean moving away from Clearwater, leaving the repair shop, and starting over in a completely different place." Lucas, with his characteristic thoughtfulness, asked the practical question that David had been dreading. Would we have to leave all our friends and change schools? David felt the weight of parental responsibility as he considered how to balance his own career aspirations with his children's need for stability and continuity. "Those are exactly the kinds of questions we'd need to think about very carefully," David replied honestly. "A job with SpaceX would be an amazing opportunity for me professionally, but our family's happiness and your education are more important than any career advancement." Emma surprised him with her response. "Dad, you've been helping everyone else fix their problems for years. Maybe it's time for someone to help fix your problems too." David looked at his daughter, amazed by her mature perspective on their family's circumstances. "What do you mean, Em? I mean, you're really smart about technical stuff, but you spend all your time fixing broken televisions and computers instead of doing the space work you really want to do. If someone's offering you a chance to do the work you're actually excited about, maybe we should think seriously about it." Lucas nodded in agreement with his sister's assessment. "And it's not like we'd be moving to another planet. California and Texas have kids and schools and normal stuff, right?" David felt a surge of love and pride at his children's maturity and their willingness to consider major changes for the sake of their family's long-term welfare. Their support didn't eliminate the practical challenges of such a significant life transition, but it made the prospect feel much less daunting. "You're both right that this could be an amazing opportunity for our family," David acknowledged. "But it's also a big risk. The repair shop provides steady income and allows us to live in a place where everything is familiar and predictable." "Dad," Emma said with the devastating logic that 8-year-olds sometimes deploy, "is the repair shop actually providing steady income?" Because you seem pretty worried about money most of the time. David realized that his children had been more aware of their family's financial pressures than he had hoped to shield them from experiencing. Their willingness to consider major changes suggested that they understood their current situation wasn't entirely satisfactory. "You're right that we've been struggling financially," David admitted. "A position with SpaceX would almost certainly provide better financial security, in addition to being more interesting work." The three of them sat together in the quiet shop, surrounded by the tools and equipment that had provided their livelihood for the past several years, contemplating changes that could reshape their entire future. Outside, the desert night was peaceful and still, offering no hints about what tomorrow might bring. "So what happens next?" Lucas asked practically. "Elena is going to recommend me to SpaceX's hiring team, and they'll contact me about interviews and assessments. If they offer me a position, we'll need to make a decision about whether to accept it." Emma yawned, finally showing signs of fatigue after the evening's excitement. "Can we learn more about the places where SpaceX has offices? Like what the schools are like and whether they have good libraries?" David smiled at his daughter's priorities. "Absolutely. If this opportunity develops into a real possibility, we'll research everything thoroughly before making any decisions." As David tucked his children into bed that night, he found himself feeling more optimistic about their family's future than he had in years. The chance encounter with Elena had opened possibilities that seemed almost too good to be true, but the evening's events had demonstrated that sometimes unexpected opportunities really could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Later, alone in the shop where the satellite dish continued its silent communication with distant spacecraft, David allowed himself to imagine what it might be like to work for SpaceX, contributing to missions that pushed the boundaries of human exploration and technological capability. The prospect was both thrilling and terrifying, representing changes that could transform not just his career but his entire family's life trajectory. As he finally headed upstairs to bed, David paused to look once more at Elena's business card, with its simple identification of one of the world's most innovative companies. Tomorrow would bring the normal challenges of running a small business in a struggling economy, but it might also bring the first steps toward opportunities he had never dared to hope for. The desert night settled around Clearwater with its usual quiet intensity, giving no indication that this small town had just played host to encounters that could reshape the future for a struggling father and his remarkable children. In the morning, Elena would return to her high-stakes world of aerospace operations, but she would carry with her the conviction that she had found exactly the kind of person SpaceX needed to support its ambitious missions. David's modest repair shop had facilitated communication between Earth and space, bridging the gap between everyday technical problems and humanity's greatest technological achievements. As he drifted off to sleep, David wondered whether his own life was about to bridge a similar gap, carrying him from the familiar challenges of small-town survival to the extraordinary possibilities of participating in humanity's journey to the stars. 3 days later, David's phone rang with a California area code that made his heart skip a beat. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Sarah Mitchell, SpaceX's Director of Technical Recruitment, and her tone carried the professional warmth of someone delivering genuinely good news. "Mr. Chen, Dr. Rodriguez has provided an exceptional recommendation for your technical capabilities and problem-solving skills. We'd like to invite you to participate in our candidate assessment process, beginning with a technical interview via video conference this Friday." David gripped the phone tighter, hardly believing that Elena's promise was materializing so quickly. "I'd be very interested in participating. What would the technical interview involve?" "We'll present several real-world scenarios similar to the ground operations support work you'd be performing. The assessment focuses on practical problem-solving rather than theoretical knowledge, since Dr. Rodriguez emphasized your hands-on expertise." After scheduling the interview and receiving detailed information about the assessment process, David spent the rest of the week preparing intensively. He researched SpaceX's current missions, studied advanced satellite communication protocols, and reviewed orbital mechanics principles that he hadn't touched since his original certification pursuits. Emma and Lucas threw themselves into researching SpaceX facilities and the communities surrounding them. They created detailed presentations about schools, libraries, recreational opportunities, and cost of living comparisons that impressed David with their thoroughness and maturity. "Dad, look at this," Emma announced, spreading printouts across the kitchen table. The elementary school near the California facility has an aerospace science program where kids can design and test model rockets, and they have a partnership with the actual SpaceX engineers for mentorship projects. Lucas added his own discoveries. The high school computer science program includes classes on satellite programming and space mission simulation, plus they have robotics teams that compete in national competitions. David reviewed their research with growing amazement at how thoroughly his children had embraced the possibility of major life changes. Their enthusiasm helped offset his own anxiety about uprooting their established routines and familiar environment. Friday morning arrived with typical desert clarity, bright sunshine streaming through the shop windows as David prepared for the most important interview of his professional life. He had converted a corner of the shop into a professional-looking video conference setup, testing camera angles and lighting to ensure optimal presentation. The interview began promptly at 9 o'clock California time, with Dr. Mitchell joined by 2 other SpaceX technical managers. Their questions were practical and scenario-based, presenting real problems that ground operations teams had encountered during actual missions. Mr. Chen, imagine you're supporting a satellite deployment mission and suddenly lose telemetry from the primary communication satellite just as the deployment sequence begins. You have backup communication channels, but they're providing conflicting data about satellite status. Walk us through your troubleshooting approach. David felt his confidence grow as he worked through the scenario, drawing on both his technical knowledge and his practical experience with complex system failures. The interviewers asked follow-up questions that revealed the depth of his understanding and his ability to think systematically under pressure. The second scenario involved coordinating multiple ground stations during a Mars communication window, requiring real-time adaptation to atmospheric interference and orbital mechanics variations. David's responses demonstrated not only technical competence, but also the kind of calm, problem-solving approach that mission-critical operations demanded. Excellent, Dr. Mitchell concluded after an hour of intensive technical discussion. Your approach to systematic troubleshooting and your understanding of communication system integration are exactly what we need for our ground operations team. The final portion of the interview focused on practical considerations about family relocation and David's long-term career objectives. David spoke honestly about his commitment to his children's welfare while expressing genuine enthusiasm for contributing to SpaceX's mission objectives. Mr. Chen, we're prepared to offer you a position as Senior Ground Operations Specialist based at our California facility. The compensation package includes relocation assistance, family housing support, and comprehensive benefits. Are you interested in proceeding to the formal offer stage? David felt the world shift around him as he processed the reality of receiving a job offer from SpaceX. Yes, absolutely interested. Could you provide details about the timeline and relocation process? We'd like you to start within 6 weeks, which would allow time for closing your current business operations and arranging family relocation. Our employee services team will coordinate housing assistance and school enrollment for your children. After concluding the interview, David sat in his shop for several minutes, trying to absorb the magnitude of what had just occurred. The repair shop that had been his refuge and survival strategy for years would soon give way to opportunities he had barely dared to imagine. Emma and Lucas, who had been anxiously waiting upstairs during the interview, appeared at the shop door with expectant faces. "Well?" Emma demanded immediately. "They offered me the position," David announced, his voice still carrying disbelief at the turn his life was taking. Both children erupted in celebration, their excitement infectious and heartwarming. Lucas immediately began calculating timelines for school transfers and housing arrangements, while Emma started planning what personal belongings would make the cross-country move. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of practical arrangements and emotional preparations. David worked with a business broker to arrange the sale of his repair shop, ensuring that his regular customers would have continued service from the new owner. The process was bittersweet, representing the end of a chapter that had provided stability during his family's most challenging years. Elena called twice during the transition period, offering practical advice about relocating to California and expressing genuine excitement about David joining the SpaceX team. Her support and encouragement helped ease the anxiety that accompanied such major life changes. "David, you're going to love the work environment," Elena assured him during their final conversation before the move. "The technical challenges are exactly what you've been preparing for, and the mission focus creates a sense of purpose that makes every problem worth solving." The SpaceX Employee Services team exceeded David's expectations in coordinating family relocation. They arranged temporary housing in a family-friendly community near the California facility, enrolled Emma and Lucas in excellent schools, and provided comprehensive orientation materials about their new environment. Moving day arrived with a mixture of excitement and melancholy, as David, Emma, and Lucas loaded their essential belongings into a rented truck for the drive to California. The repair shop looked smaller and more modest than ever as they locked the door for the final time, but it also looked like the foundation that had made their new opportunities possible. "Dad," Emma said as they drove away from Clearwater, "do you think we'll ever come back here?" David considered his daughter's question carefully. "We'll definitely visit. This place will always be part of our story, even as we write new chapters somewhere else." The drive to California took 2 days, with overnight stops that allowed the family to process the magnitude of their life transition. Lucas spent hours researching their new community using the tablet computer he'd received as a going-away gift from his Clearwater computer science teacher. Emma created detailed lists of questions she wanted to ask her new teachers about aerospace science programs. Their first glimpse of the SpaceX facility took David's breath away. The complex stretched across hundreds of acres, with sleek modern buildings housing some of the world's most advanced aerospace development and manufacturing capabilities. Rocket components and testing equipment visible through large windows reminded everyone that this was where humanity's most ambitious technological dreams became reality. Employee orientation began David's first day with comprehensive briefings about SpaceX's mission objectives, safety protocols, and operational procedures. The technical sophistication of the Ground Operations Center exceeded his expectations, with multiple mission control rooms supporting simultaneous operations across Earth orbit, lunar missions, and Mars exploration initiatives. "Chen, welcome to Ground Operations," called Tom Harrison, David's new supervisor, as he entered the main control room for the first time. "Elena Rodriguez spoke very highly of your technical capabilities. Ready to jump into some real mission support?" David's first assignment involved supporting a routine satellite deployment mission, working alongside experienced operators who guided him through SpaceX's specific procedures and protocols. The work was everything he had hoped for and more, combining sophisticated technical challenges with the knowledge that success directly enabled humanity's expansion into space. Satellite deployment sequence initiated. David announced into his headset microphone, monitoring telemetry displays that showed real-time data from a satellite being released into precise orbital position. All systems nominal, trajectory tracking as planned. The satisfaction of participating in successful space operations was unlike anything David had experienced in his years of routine electronics repair. Every procedure had significance that extended far beyond immediate technical objectives, contributing to missions that pushed the boundaries of human knowledge and capability. Emma and Lucas adapted to their new schools with remarkable resilience, quickly making friends and throwing themselves into academic programs that challenged and inspired them in ways their Clearwater education had never provided. Emma's aerospace science class included field trips to SpaceX facilities, while Lucas joined a robotics team that was designing Mars exploration equipment prototypes. "Dad, you're not going to believe what we learned today," Emma announced excitedly after her first aerospace science field trip. "They showed us the engines that will power the first crewed mission to Mars, and the teacher said that the ground operations team helps coordinate every aspect of mission planning and execution." David felt overwhelmed with gratitude at how perfectly the career transition was working out for his entire family. The children were thriving in their new educational environment, he was doing the most meaningful work of his professional life, and their financial security had improved dramatically with his SpaceX salary and benefits. 3 months into his new position, David received an unexpected assignment that would test all of his technical skills and problem-solving abilities. A critical communications satellite supporting Mars exploration operations had developed an intermittent fault that was threatening to disrupt ongoing scientific research and mission planning. "Chen, we need your satellite communication expertise," Tom Harrison explained during an emergency briefing. "The primary relay satellite for Mars operations is showing signal degradation that's affecting data transmission from our surface exploration vehicles. Standard troubleshooting procedures haven't identified the problem source." David studied the technical data with the systematic approach he had developed over years of solving complex equipment failures. The intermittent nature of the problem suggested hardware issues that might not be detectable through routine diagnostic procedures. The signal degradation pattern looks consistent with antenna pointing drift, David observed after analyzing several hours of telemetry data. But the satellite's attitude control system shows normal operation, which suggests the problem might be in the ground-based tracking systems rather than the satellite itself. The suggestion surprised the mission team, who had been focusing their troubleshooting efforts on satellite hardware rather than ground equipment. David's recommendation led to discovery of a subtle calibration error in one of the primary tracking stations, a problem that had been gradually worsening over several weeks. Outstanding diagnosis, Chen, Elena Rodriguez commented when she learned about David's successful problem identification. She had flown in from headquarters specifically to oversee the critical satellite repair coordination. Your systematic approach to complex system troubleshooting is exactly why we knew you'd be valuable to the team. The successful resolution of the Mars communication crisis established David's reputation within SpaceX as someone who could solve problems that stumped more experienced operators. His combination of theoretical knowledge and practical troubleshooting skills proved ideal for the unpredictable challenges of space operations support. 6 months after joining SpaceX, David received another unexpected call from Elena Rodriguez, this time with an offer that would represent yet another major step forward in his career development. David, we're expanding our Mars mission support operations, and we need someone to lead the ground communications team for the next crewed mission to Mars. The position would involve coordinating multiple international partners, managing complex technical systems, and ensuring reliable communication links during humanity's most ambitious space exploration mission. David felt his heart race at the implications of Elena's offer. Leading ground communications for a crewed Mars mission would represent the pinnacle of achievement in his field, responsibility for systems that would be critical to astronaut safety and mission success. Elena, that sounds like an incredible opportunity, but also an enormous responsibility. Are you confident that I have the experience needed for such a critical assignment? David, your performance over the past 6 months has demonstrated exactly the kind of technical leadership and problem-solving capability that Mars mission support requires. You've shown ability to think systematically under pressure, coordinate complex troubleshooting efforts, and maintain focus on mission-critical objectives even when facing unprecedented challenges. The Mars mission leadership position would require David's family to relocate again, this time to SpaceX's Texas facility, where the Mars mission control operations were based. Emma and Lucas, now fully adjusted to their California life, approached the prospect of another move with the adaptability they had developed over the past year. Dad, leading ground communications for Mars exploration is like the most important job in space operations, Lucas observed with his characteristic thoroughness. If the astronauts need help, or if something goes wrong, you be part of the team that helps solve problems and keeps everyone safe. Emma's response was even more direct. Dad, you have to take the job. How many people get to help send humans to Mars? This is like the most amazing thing that could ever happen to our family. David realized that his children had developed perspective about their father's career that he sometimes lacked himself. They understood that his work had significance far beyond personal advancement, contributing to achievements that would benefit all of humanity. The Texas relocation went even more smoothly than the California move, with SpaceX's employee services team coordinating every aspect of housing, school enrollment, and community integration. Emma and Lucas found themselves in educational programs that were even more advanced and opportunity-rich than what they had experienced in California. David's new position as Mars Mission Ground Communications Director represented the culmination of a career journey that had begun with repairing a damaged satellite dish in a small Nevada desert town. The irony wasn't lost on him that the technical skills he had developed while struggling to maintain a failing electronics repair shop had ultimately qualified him to support humanity's greatest space exploration achievement. The Mars mission preparation process consumed the next 18 months, with David coordinating technical teams across multiple countries and ensuring that every aspect of ground-based communication support met the exacting requirements for astronaut safety and mission success. The work was demanding and often stressful, but it was also the most fulfilling professional experience of his life. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as Deputy Director of Mars Operations, worked closely with David throughout the mission preparation process. Their professional relationship had evolved into genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared commitment to mission success. David, do you ever think about how different your life might have been if that satellite dish in Clearwater hadn't broken down? Elena asked during one of their mission planning sessions. David smiled at the question he had pondered countless times over the past 2 years. I think about it constantly, but I also think about how all the experiences that prepared me for this work happened during those years when I thought my career was going nowhere. The problem-solving skills, the ability to work under pressure, the systematic approach to complex technical challenges. I developed all of that while running a small-town repair shop. That's exactly why you're so effective in this role, Elena replied. Space operations require people who can solve unexpected problems with whatever resources are available, maintain focus under extreme pressure, and never lose sight of what's truly important. Those characteristics can't be taught in any classroom. Launch day for the Mars mission arrived with global attention, focused on SpaceX's historic achievement. David sat in the Mars mission ground communication center, surrounded by banks of monitors showing real-time data from the spacecraft carrying 3 astronauts toward humanity's first crewed landing on another planet. Ground communications, this is Mars 1, came the voice of Mission Commander Sarah Park from 30 million miles away. All systems nominal, crew status excellent, ready for trajectory correction burn on your mark. David felt the weight of responsibility as he coordinated with mission control teams around the world to ensure perfect timing for the critical engine burn that would fine-tune the spacecraft's approach to Mars. MARS-1, ground communications confirms all tracking stations show optimal signal strength. You are go for trajectory correction burn in T-minus 60 seconds. The successful completion of the trajectory correction burn represented just one of hundreds of critical coordination points that David's team would manage throughout the 8-month Mars mission. Each communication exchange carried the knowledge that crew safety depended on flawless technical execution and seamless international cooperation. Emma and Lucas, now 13 and 17 respectively, watched the Mars mission coverage with pride that was evident to everyone around them. Their father's work had become part of the historic achievement that would be remembered as long as humans explored space. Dad, when people study the first human mission to Mars hundreds of years from now, they'll read about the ground communications team that kept the astronauts connected to Earth. Emma observed with the wisdom that had characterized her since childhood. That's pretty amazing. David realized that his daughter was right. The work he was doing would become part of human history, contributing to achievements that would inspire generations of young people to pursue careers in science, technology, and space exploration. The Mars mission continued successfully for 8 months, with David's team maintaining perfect communication links between Earth and the Mars surface exploration team. The scientific discoveries transmitted through those communication links advanced human understanding of Mars geology, atmospheric science, and the potential for future human colonization. When the Mars astronauts finally lifted off from the Martian surface for their return journey to Earth, David felt both pride in the mission's success and anticipation for the next phases of space exploration that his work would help enable. Chen, exceptional work throughout the Mars mission, Tom Harrison announced during the mission completion celebration. Your communication coordination was flawless, and your team's performance exceeded every operational requirement. Elena Rodriguez approached David during the celebration with news that represented yet another unexpected opportunity. David, NASA has requested that you lead an international task force developing communication protocols for lunar base operations. It would mean working directly with space agencies from around the world to design systems for humanity's first permanent off-world settlement. David looked around the Mission Control Center, where his team was celebrating the successful completion of humanity's first crewed Mars mission. 2.5 years earlier, he had been struggling to keep a small electronics repair shop profitable enough to support his family. Now he was being offered leadership of international space communication development that would enable humanity's expansion throughout the solar system. Elena, 3 years ago I was fixing broken televisions in a desert town. Now you're offering me the opportunity to design communication systems for lunar colonization. Sometimes I wonder if this is all an incredible dream. Elena smiled with the warmth of someone who had watched David's remarkable journey from the very beginning. David, you've earned every opportunity through technical excellence and dedication to mission success. The repair shop in Clearwater wasn't a dead end. It was preparation for exactly the work you're doing now. David thought about Emma and Lucas, who had adapted to each new challenge and opportunity with resilience and enthusiasm that amazed him daily. They had gone from small-town children with limited prospects to young people growing up at the center of humanity's greatest adventure. I'll need to discuss the opportunity with Emma and Lucas, David said, though he already knew what their response would be. Of course, but I think you'll find that your children understand the significance of this work as well as anyone. That evening, David sat with Emma and Lucas on the porch of their Texas home, looking up at stars that no longer seemed impossibly distant. The work he was doing was literally expanding humanity's reach toward those stars, enabling future generations to explore and settle throughout the solar system. "Dad," Lucas said thoughtfully, "when you were in Clearwater fixing electronics, did you ever imagine that you'd be designing communication systems for people living on the moon?" David considered his son's question carefully. "I dreamed about working in aerospace, but I never imagined anything as ambitious as what's happening now. The opportunities have exceeded my wildest expectations." Emma, now 13 and remarkably mature for her age, added her own perspective. "Dad, I think the reason you're so good at space communication work is because you spent all those years helping people in Clearwater solve their problems. You learned how to fix things when people really needed help, and that's exactly what astronauts need when they're exploring space." David felt overwhelmed with gratitude for his children's wisdom and support throughout their family's remarkable journey. They had given up the familiar security of small-town life to support his career dreams, and they had thrived in ways that exceeded his hopes for their development and education. "So," David said with a smile, "should I tell Elena that we're ready for our next adventure?" "Absolutely," both children replied simultaneously, their enthusiasm infectious and heartwarming. As David prepared to accept leadership of the International Lunar Communication Development Project, he reflected on the series of unexpected events that had transformed his family's life. A broken satellite dish in a small desert town had led to opportunities he never could have planned or predicted, demonstrating that sometimes the most significant changes emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. The work ahead would be challenging and demanding, requiring coordination of technical teams across multiple countries, and the development of communication systems for environments no human had ever experienced permanently. But David knew that he was ready for those challenges, prepared by years of solving complex problems under pressure and supported by a family that shared his commitment to contributing to humanity's greatest adventure. Elena Rodriguez had kept her promise from that stormy night in Clearwater, providing opportunities that had transformed David from a struggling small-town repair shop owner into one of the world's leading experts on space communication systems. More importantly, she had helped him discover that his technical skills and problem-solving abilities were exactly what humanity needed to expand its presence throughout the solar system. As David looked up at the night sky, he could see the International Space Station passing overhead, its lights a reminder that humans were already living and working in space. Soon, those lights would be joined by lunar bases and Mars settlements, all connected by communication systems that he was helping to design and implement. The modest electronics repair shop in Clearwater, Nevada, had been the starting point for a journey that would help connect humanity's future throughout the solar system. David Chen's story had become proof that expertise and dedication could emerge from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most important opportunities arrive disguised as routine technical problems requiring immediate attention. Emma and Lucas would grow up knowing that their father's work had helped enable humanity's expansion into space, providing communication links that would keep Earth connected to its children among the stars. The satellite dish repair that had brought their family together with Elena Rodriguez had ultimately become the foundation for achievements that would inspire generations of young people to reach for opportunities among the stars. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.